Hi everybody. So in this video we're going to talk about switches and digital inputs and how to use them to control a little LED and turn a little LED on and off. So first of all, let's talk about the switch here. So this is a little push button switch, and it's made so that it pretty much spans the trench of the breadboard, and we're only going to really use half of it, which is this leg and this leg here. And what happens is when it's just normally resting, there's no connection between this leg and this leg of the switch. But when you push the button, then this leg becomes connected to this leg. So the way I've got it set up is over here in this row I've got the orange cable going over to channel 8, and then the other leg is connected to ground because of course I've got 5 volts and ground going to my power rails. And so normally this leg here, or this input, is just floating, but when the button gets pushed it gets shorted to ground, and so you'll get 0 volts traveling into the input. So let's take a look at the code and we'll see how this works. So in our code we've got, in our setup loop, we have the pin mode. We're looking at channel 8. It's going to be an input, but it's a special kind of input. The input mode that we're using is input pull-up, and what this is doing is this is pulling the input high unless unless it's shorted to ground. So in the case when the button is not being pushed, so this leg is just floating, then channel 8 is going to read high. When the button's pushed, it'll short it to ground and channel 8 should read low. I'm going to want to do this, we'll look at this on the serial monitor, so I'll set up my serial connection. Then for the main loop, I'm going to read in, so I'll use the digital read, channel 8. I'll put that in the variable button 1, and then I'm going to print the value of button 1 to the serial monitor, and then I'll just add a short delay so that it doesn't run all at once. So let's go ahead and take a look at the serial monitor and see what the serial monitor is showing us. So now I've got the serial monitor up, and you can see when I'm not pushing the button, the serial monitor is printing 1. Now something else we should talk about with these digital inputs, 1 corresponds to high, which means there's 5 volts on it, and a 0 will correspond to low or 0 volts. So since we did that input pull-up in the start of the code, that is going to have us sitting at 1 or high just by default. So now I'm going to come in and push the button, and you can see while I have the button pushed, it shorts these two legs together, and so the input is shorted into ground and I read 0. When I release the button it goes back to 1, and I can push the button repeatedly and make that go to 0. So let's bring in an LED light and see if we can use this button to control an LED light. Okay, so now I've brought in an external LED. I've got my 220 ohm resistor current limiting the current through the LED attached to the negative end of the LED and going to ground. On the positive end of the LED I've got a jumper wire taking me into channel 2 of the Arduino, which is going to control the LED. And let me show you what this does before I show you the code. So what this does is when I push the button, the light turns on, and when I release the button, the light turns off. So the button is controlling the LED. So let's take a look at the code here and see if we can understand what's going on. So I've still got the pin mode 8 input pull-up. That will, again, control the button. I've also added this pin mode 2 output. This is channel 2, and it's controlling the LED, and it's of course an output. I've still got my digital read, so I'm reading the state of channel 8 and writing it into the variable button 1. Then I've got an if statement, so if button 1 is equal to 0, and when I'm doing logical equals, I need double equal sign. So if button 1 is equal to 0, so if it's low, that means I've pushed the button, then I'll write channel 2 high or turn the LED on. Otherwise, I'll turn the LED off. So that is how we get this basic functionality. Push the button, LED comes on. Release the button, LED turns off. Now it might be nice if we had a way to push one button, the LED turns on and stays on, and we had another button we could push and then that would turn the LED off. So let me add this extra push button switch and we'll take a look at that. Okay, so now I've brought in a second button, and I'm doing the same kind of thing I did with the first button. I've got one leg of the button going to ground and the other leg going to one of the Arduino channels. In this case, this is channel 5. Everything else about the circuit is staying the same. And let me show you what happens now. So when I push the first button, the LED turns on and stays on, and when I push the second button, the LED turns off. So now let's go through the code and see how we implemented this. So in the code, I've added an extra line for pin 5 as an input pull-up, following exactly the same procedure for channel 8. In the loop, I now read in not only channel 8 and put that in button 1, but I also read in channel 5 and put that in a new variable, button 2. Our if statements look very similar. So if button 1 is equal to 0, I'm going to turn the LED on. However, now, in order to turn it off, I've got this if statement. So if button 2 is equal to 0, only then will I turn the LED off. So this implementation gives us the behavior that when button 1 is pushed, the light goes on and stays on, and when button 2 is pushed, the light goes off and stays off.